Hello, my humans. Welcome back to the Convo Couch. I am Pasta Jardula.
And I'm Fiorella.
And Johnny Sue is still spinning on those ones and twos. And today we have a special guest
We do.
in the studio. And I've never been so happier, fam, to be back on this couch with no smoke and no projectiles. Today we have Elena Popp with us. Elena Popp has been a regular guest. She is a lawyer and an advocate for renters' rights. She also started the ever-growing Facebook page COVID-19 Tenants' Rights, hashtag on every fridge. Elena Popp, thank you for coming back on the show.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
We're still, it seems like we're caught in this hamster wheel. We're getting out of it. It's going to end. Wait. The spike numbers are up. We're back in it again. People aren't going back to work. The economy hasn't opened up. Just basic bottom line so everybody understands. Starting at the top, has there been any renter or mortgage aid from the federal government so far? Or is there any help on the horizon from the federal government?
Federal government gave assistance to federally subsidized tenants in the form of eviction protection under the CARES Act and to federally subsidized mortgage holders in the form of forbearance plans, meaning you don't have to pay your mortgage during the pandemic. And frankly, that latter one was very smooth, I would say. But that is the only thing that the federal government has done besides the assistance checks in round one of the CARES Act.
No renters help whatsoever, nothing on the horizon that you see.
Correct.
So the federal government is still sticking it to us, pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of bills that are being talked about. One is a loan subsidy, rent subsidy bill, and there is still the Omar bill, but no movement on that. And the Omar bill would have been a rent forgiveness bill, which is what we really need.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
But nothing's happened.
That's unfortunate, of course. So what has the state and Gavin Newsom provided for California as far as renters and mortgage assistance? Perhaps there's been talk of renewals.
Gavin Newsom has himself done nothing. In March, he issued an order saying local governments do something. And he has renewed that in May. He renewed it to the end of July. And a week ago, those provisions were renewed till the end of September. All that means is that our local elected officials still have time to do something to protect tenants in the long run. So far, all of our local elected officials have simply put forth what I'm now calling 40 Band-Aids on a bullet wound. In the county of Los Angeles, it's cute, right? In the county of Los Angeles, we have approximately 40 local laws that are a mishmash patchwork, 40 Band-Aids on a bullet wound, that will not solve the problem, but have caused some delay in the problem. But the main protection for tenants right now is still the state Judicial Council's Rule 1. I believe it is the brainchild of our Chief Justice. Landlords can file evictions, but the court will not give them the summons. This has been true since April 6th. Without the summons, the case can't move forward. There cannot be an order to evict the tenant. And therefore, there's been a reduction in eviction filings and no new eviction orders since April 6th. This is a huge benefit for tenants. But it is a very precarious protection because the Judicial Council is not really a governing body, and it's not governed by the Brown Act, and it has its own, very informal processes. We almost lost Rule 1 on June 8th. We get this email. Rule 1 is going to get suspended. They're voting by email between now and 4 p.m. on June 10th. So they were already voting when we launched a campaign to stop them. And the Chief Justice then ultimately decided to listen to the pleas of tenants and did not suspend the rule. But she sent a clear message to our legislature, do something. So then your next question would be, has the legislature done anything? And they have not. The
Why?
legislature has not passed.
Why are they so hesitant to move on this, Elena? Why are they dragging their feet? Don't they realize that this is going to affect their reelection status? I mean, if they let people go out in the street, why are they so hesitant to move? Is it because of the real estate lobby that's in this country that's so powerful?
Partly the real estate lobby, partly the developer lobby, partly the fact that most of them themselves are landlords, realtors, or developers. And so they don't understand how desperate tenants are for rent forgiveness. The most hopeful bill that we have right now is not a rent forgiveness bill. It's AB 1436. We are supporting it, even though it's not a rent forgiveness bill. What it would do is take that COVID-19 debt, and the tenant would still owe it to the landlord, but the landlord could not collect it in eviction court. They could only collect it either in small claims or in regular civil court.
Okay.
And so no eviction filing. If the landlord chose to file an eviction court in spite of this, it would be the landlord's burden to prove that the reason was not COVID-19 related. The tenant would be able to self-certify, I declare under penalty of perjury I lost my job, as opposed to having to show like a letter of termination or an EDD document. And it has a couple of other protections that are pretty important. We think, how I've been talking about tsunamis. So tsunami 1 for LA County was, and this is actually catching on. The tsunami analogy is getting used just by a lot of people. Sometimes they say tidal waves and I correct them. Not a tidal wave, a tsunami. 365,000 families at risk in LA County alone. 365,000 families at risk of eviction. So that is definitely a tsunami. Tsunami 1 should have hit us in April, in the first few weeks of April, and in May, and in June, and in July. And it never hit because of that rule 1. One good policy. And the tsunami did not come. That could be taken away any minute. We need a permanent solution. The Judicial Council has sent a clear message to the legislature. Figure it out. We need a permanent solution, and they're still working on it. What this AB 1436 would do, and everybody should call their state representatives, both their state assembly member and their senator, and say, pass AB 1436. Pass AB 1430. Every single day you should call them until they pass AB 1436. If they do nothing else in this session, they need to pass AB 1436. So it would stop Tsunami 2 because no evictions could be filed. And then it would stop Tsunami 3. Tsunami 3 comes. We have all these 12-month repayment periods. People won't be able to pay. And so there comes Tsunami 3, 12 months after the local emergencies are called off. But with this, it wouldn't be an eviction. So therefore, it would stop Tsunami 2 and Tsunami 3. But there's a little glitch, because then some people won't be able to pay during the 12 months, right? And since they won't be able to pay, the landlord will sue them in small claims court or in regular court. And the landlord will get a judgment relatively quickly. We figure maybe within 8 months. And then the landlord will garnish their wages. And then they won't be able to pay their rent 20 months from now. The reason we're still supporting this law is because it gives us 20 months to figure out what to do with that problem, right? So that's good. The other reason we're still supporting it is that it's fewer people, because it really will only affect people that have a regular paycheck that can be garnished. And so we'll figure out what to do about that as the time approaches. It certainly does stop this 365,000 caseload that we are not ready for 90 days after the governor lifts the state of emergency. And then if we survive that, we get Tsunami 3, when the local repayment periods in Pasadena, 6 months, in LA County, unincorporated, 12 months, in LA City, 12 months. When those expire, now we've got a rush of evictions. So this would take the fight out of eviction court and put it into regular civil court. And that will definitely help a lot of tenants.
So you're saying everybody should call their state representative, AB 1436, for California, and call their state representatives, get this done, get this passed, because this is going to put up some help for us, for renters out there and stuff. So what about a situation with these counties and these city aids I see out there? How do we access these aids, like the Pasadena aid that we're talking about, and what does that actually do for the people? I know Los Angeles has just ended, the city. Pasadena goes for another week that you can apply for. How do they work, and how does that affect the tenant and what they'll owe down the road?
Each program works a little bit differently, but most of them are direct aid to the landlord, not to the tenant. The tenant applies for the rent subsidy, and if approved, and if the landlord agrees to accept it, sometimes they refuse, then the money goes straight to the landlord. There's a couple of problems with these programs. First, they're both seriously underfunded and an extreme waste of money, right? So they're underfunded because if you really wanted to solve this problem, you would need at least $2 billion. If you figure 365,000 tenants and multiply that, say, by 3,000 each, $3,000. So the 365 is a low figure and the 3,000 is a low figure, $2 billion. The city of LA's program is 100 million. I don't know what the Pasadena one is, but I'm sure it's significantly less than 100 million.
Yeah.
And so they're inadequately funded. It puts people through this stress of having to go through this application process. In LA, it's a lottery. You submit all of your information, and if you qualify, then after that, it's a lottery, right? May as well go buy lottery tickets, frankly. So yeah, it's a real problem. But it also is not a good way to spend our very scarce recovery dollars. You could take that same money and buy out distressed landlords. Landlords are saying, my tenants aren't paying my rent. I can't stay as a landlord because my tenants aren't paying their rent. Let's use some of that recovery to take the burden off of these landlords that can't survive 3 months without tenant rent because they're not sufficiently leveraged, and put that housing into community hands. Let's put that housing into the hands of tenant-controlled nonprofits and limited equity cooperatives and community land trusts and other nonprofits even that will keep that housing permanently affordable so that we can get the bulk of our housing stock out of the speculative market. We have a housing crisis because our housing is in the hands of the speculative market. We can't continue doing that. We have to transfer it to community control.
So how does it exactly work, though, then, as far as like what the renter will owe? And even though it's massively underfunded, let's say I do hit the lottery, I get it. You know, I haven't paid rent in 4 months because of the coronavirus. How will this all work out? How much time? Yeah. What will the city put in?
Let's use the LA program as an example because I know that one. Okay. But in LA, the maximum you can get is $3,000. Nobody's rent is $1,000 a month, and most people are at least 4 months in arrears. So it's a part of the rent that they are covering. So let's say your rent was $1,200 and you haven't paid it for 4 months. Somebody do that math for me.
$4,800.
$4,800. And you get 3,000, you still owe. Somebody do that math.
1,800.
Or law school. 1,800. And so now you have to come up with the 1,800. You still have your tenant protections, unless in the process of getting that money, you sign an agreement to pay the 1,800 or waive your rights in court. Fortunately, the agency that's managing that program in LA County is part of the Right to Counsel Coalition in LA County, managing the LA City program. So they won't let tenants enter into those agreements, but there are tons of tenants that are signing agreements now saying, I will pay you X amount in X number of months, and I waive my right to go to court if I am not able to do it. And so and then the time arrives and they still don't have a job. There are people who signed in April thinking this would be over by July, and now the landlord is trying to enforce an agreement that they signed in April because they weren't able to pay the rent back by July 1st. So people need to stop signing things. People need to stop self-evicting. People are moving out, moving back to mom, moving in with sister. That might work just fine for a couple of months, but imagine what it's going to be like living with mom or sister for the next several years because of this housing crisis. And people are giving up below market rate rent controlled units because they're afraid they're not going to be able to pay the rent in the future. Well, let's just wait and see what happens. We may get rent forgiveness. We may there's another bill, AB 1410. SB, Senate Bill 1410. The problem with it is that it's voluntary, but it would be a 10-year repayment period. Most people could handle that, interest-free. It's not moving forward partly because it has it involves tax credits, so it has a budget consequence for the state. But maybe we get that passed. Nobody knows what's going to happen. What I can tell you now is you're not at risk of eviction now. And we are fighting very hard from 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day to make sure that you stay safe from eviction. So don't let all that great energy go to waste. Don't self-evict and get involved. Get involved. There are the tenant unions. There are the CBOs, community-based organizations, that have been fighting for housing rights for years. I will put on the chat the Tenant Survival Guide. All of them are listed. In the Tenant Survival Guide, there's a page that says, first we explain all the law, and then we ask, you want stronger laws? Get involved. When tenants call in on our hotline or on our Ask an Attorney, and then we tell them what protections we've gotten them, and they're dissatisfied with our work, I say, come help us do it, and we'll get you stronger laws. What it takes to get strong laws is for the elected officials to understand that it's not just some organizers and some lawyers. It's hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of constituents that are willing to make a call, sign a petition, write a letter, go on a Zoom call to explain their situations, do a 30-second video of yourself. Hi, to my elected officials. My name is Elena Popp. I have not been able to pay my rent. That's not true of me. I own my own home, but I'm just making rent. I have not been able to pay my rent. I am on a mortgage forbearance, though, because I am laid off. And I was fortunate to have, that's how I know the federal program was smooth. I made a call. I told them I'd been laid off, and they gave me until the end of September before I have to make a payment or figure out what we're going to do. Very good program, right? Federally insured loan. Not true if your loan is not federally insured. But now I'm pretending to be a tenant. Senator Portantino, I am your tenant in Pasadena. I haven't paid my rent in 4 months. There is very little chance my job will reopen for another 3 months. My landlord is harassing me daily for my rent. I cannot keep living like this. Please pass AB 1436. Or if you want to be more generic, please do something to cancel rents and give us some real relief. If they started getting video after video after video on social media like that, 30 seconds, it would move them to action. They're not hearing from enough constituents.
We got to get
So speaking about action too, we just got back from Portland. There's a lot of unrest. People are, not just fighting against police brutality, but they're also starting to feel the encroaching end of the $600 from the federal government, and also seeing that we're closing back up in many states. yet they're not getting the support. So people are freaking out, and they're starting to talk about rent and rent strikes and rent cancellations. Is there anything on the horizon regarding rent strikes? And would you encourage people to start protests? Because many activists I know here are just about ready to start demanding these officials to give them a rent cancellation or a rent or something like AB 13 or 1436.
So there has been a rent strike in California since May. It
Right.
started May 1st. In fact, there are 3 rent strikes that I know of. There's a local rent strike in the county called by the Los Angeles Tenants Union, where it's called Food Not Rent, and people are sending letters to their landlords and their elected officials saying, I am choosing food and health over rent payment, cancel rent, #cancel rent. The Tenants Together has called for a statewide rent strike, and I don't know how many rent strikers they have registered, but the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment has 60,000 rent strikers that went on the website and said, I am striking for rent cancellation. Now, there are 17 million renters. I'm not exactly sure how many renter households. There's probably in the 4 or 5 million range. So in order to have a real impact, that rent strike needs to have 1.5, 2 million rent strikers registered. I think we need time to organize that, to get everyone to go on that rent strike website and say what their situation is. We're collecting stories on the Housing Now website. So if you go on housingnow.org, you can fill out a form where you tell your story, and then we send those stories along to all the state elected officials. Frankly, we need to do something a little bit more coordinated so that if somebody puts a story on Housing Now, it can go to city council, state, and federal elected officials. And having thought of it on your show, I will make that suggestion to Housing Now that they start using the stories that way, so that we don't have people putting on stories on multiple websites. But you need to, every single morning, right? Get up, wash your face, brush your teeth, make a cup of coffee. And then at 9 o'clock, you call all of your elected officials. To get their numbers, you're going to go on the Do You Want Stronger Laws page in the Tenant Survival Guide. It tells you how to get all of their numbers.
Yeah.
If every single tenant in the state of California did that as part of their daily routine, and then throw in a half an hour walk, because I started doing that this week and I feel so much better. Throw in a half an hour walk. It really gives you a whole new outlook on life, and make those calls every single morning. If every single person listening to this did that, we would get rent cancellation.
Yeah.
Oh, but I called yesterday. So what? Call again today. Until we get it, you call every morning.
Anthony Portantino is going to hate me after a while. Anthony, have we got any rent relief, Anthony? I'm going to go Paisan the Paisan. And I'm glad you're doing that half-hour walk. Another thing to make you feel great, Elena, is going vegan. That's awesome. You'll feel really great. We're kind of experiencing that here. But there's something you said that I want to talk about in that last statement you made, because I have a friend of ours, he says, well, why aren't you guys paying your rent? You got your unemployment. You got the extra money. I said, yeah, but if I gave all that money that I have in the bank for rent, I'll have nothing left. And then all of a sudden, when this is lifted up, I have no job to go back to. I'm really stuck. So what is your recommendations for people who are collecting unemployment to pay or not to pay the rent? Because you said before you have to have several months in the bank before you start giving up that cheese.
So what our survival guide says is make a 4-month budget. And it has to be a reasonable budget, not I dream that I'm going to have a job in 4 months budget, but a real budget that you can really count on. And if you have any money left over for rent and you want to start chipping away at that rent, sure. But I'm not so sure how sound that advice is, because I never thought this would last more than 4 months. And now it's looking like it'll last probably at least till April. Many people are thinking that we should not reopen until we have a vaccine. Every time we try to reopen, numbers go up. So I'm not sure it's a good idea to have people just rely on 4 months. We're thinking of changing that to make an 8-month budget. And even then, it feels a little insecure. We are in very insecure times.
Yeah.
No, if you haven't lost your job, you should probably be paying your rent, unless you want to be a solidarity rent striker. A solidarity rent striker is someone who doesn't pay the rent out of the political commitment to support their neighbors who can't pay the rent. It is a very precarious political act. It's not quite nonviolent civil disobedience, but it carries some consequences, because you won't have the same defenses as someone who isn't able to pay rent.
Right.
There is a page on solidarity striking in the survival guide and things you should consider. Frankly, if every tenant in the state went on a solidarity rent strike, it would be relatively safe to do, and we would get the attention of the electeds. Exactly. But as a lawyer, if I were an organizer, I'd say, let's do it. As a lawyer, I have to be cautious to not advise people that will put them in a precarious legal position. However, we have done a page that explains the consequences for those that really want to do it because they want to be in solidarity with their unemployed neighbors.
And just so people know, who didn't see the first couple shows, if I were to start not paying rent right now, what would I do? Because let's say I thought like this would be over by now, and it's not, and my $600 are running out, and now I have to start really saving that money. How would I go about that process? Just bullet points.
So every law is different. So we're telling everyone to do this because it's the most restrictive. Your landlord has a right to know you're not going to pay your rent. So a couple of days before the rent is due, send them a letter saying, I am not going to pay the rent because I've been affected by COVID. There is a sample letter in the survival guide. In fact, there are two. There's a nice, gentle, soft one. And then there's another one that's stop harassing me, stop asking me, leave me alone. Things haven't changed. It's, much more like that. And then be frugal in your spending, right? It's not the time to spend a lot of money, although frankly, there's nothing to spend money on, right? Stores are closed, restaurants are closed. You can't go to the movies. So be frugal in your spending and then wait and see what happens. There will be a point at which the state of emergency is lifted. And hopefully by the time it is, we will be ready to counsel people. We are, especially in the northeast part of LA County, including Pasadena, where you're filming from, we are starting a coalition that is recruiting collaborating partners to help people negotiate these agreements. So local churches and schools and senior centers and youth programs, so that basically you've got the teacher at the school helping the parent of their student negotiate these agreements. We're calling it Access LA, and it'll be supervised by lawyers. You'll get training. So 5 trainings, one on COVID tenant rights, one on regular tenant rights, one on how to negotiate this 2-page agreement that we're drafting, one on how to identify a tenant leader. Because if we can form tenant associations and engage in collective bargaining, in other words, all the tenants in your building collectively bargain an agreement around rent repayment, around rent reduction. The rents are crazy. They need to go down. Around buying the landlord out, getting repairs done, and anything else that you want to collectively bargain, much like unions collectively bargain. Right. Better conditions for their workers. When the law doesn't protect, you do it through collective bargaining. We have a rich history in this country of supporting that kind of organizing and collective bargaining. And so these tenant associations would negotiate these agreements. It would help a lot of people. So how do we form those tenant associations? We have the pastor at the church identify a tenant leader, plug them into a tenant union. Now we have a tenant association.
Yep.
And then the last training of the 5-part training, regular tenants' rights, COVID tenant rights, how to negotiate this agreement for the individual that's not in a building, how to identify a tenant leader and plug them into the tenant unions, is how to stop an illegal lockout. I said that we're having a reduction in eviction filings, which is good. We're seeing a huge uptick in illegal lockouts. It's in the hundreds in LA County. In LA City, it's in the hundreds. In the county, it's probably reaching about 1,000 cases. But it's horrible when someone comes home and all their stuff is on the street. You come home and there's a padlock on your door. The police are not helpful, and in fact, they've become dangerous to call. And so the LA Tenants Union and the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment both have rapid response hotlines where tenants can call, and then activists show up with bolt cutters and pieces of board to create barriers and signs and media and everything you need to keep someone in place. And it is working. At first, it was scary for me as a lawyer to use that instead of my natural responses: call the police and make the police enforce the law and arrest the landlord. But there became a point at which the Black Lives Matter movement call to eliminate the police, to make them irrelevant, became my rallying cry as well, because they do make things worse when they are there. And so teaching people how to do that, because we need a lot more rapid responders than we have right now.
Police can't even do that friggin' right. You know what I'm saying? They can't even do this right. Police suck. They need to get their shit together.
It's more like a form of community policing, right? Just getting the community out there to protect.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
Where can I find this guide at?
Huh?
The renter survival guide. This is on the page I introduced you on. Hashtag on every fridge.
I will put it on the chat right now, so that you can share it however you want to share it.
All right, Johnny will get that and he'll put that up. And I also want to talk about the fact that I heard a lot of people back in the days like, "Oh, I'm part of the grassroots movement. I'm part of the grassroots movement." And now, instead of standing in solidarity, because you've said before, even if you can pay the rent, you shouldn't pay the rent. You should stand with your poorer brothers and sisters. Therefore, we can increase our collective bargaining agreement chances better, more numbers. But yet you have those people still paying the rent when they shouldn't be paying the rent. Because we should all be standing together on this to get what we need. But what is it going to look like down the road? Let's just give a scenario 9 months down the road from now. Like, I haven't paid my rent, and now the state of emergencies are lifted. The courthouses are open. You have this other tsunami of evictions coming. I owe 9 months rent. What could we look for as far as bargaining out or getting out or paying out for a lesser amount? What would that look like, and what do you think could happen? Because I know a lot of people are nervous making this step.
Two hypothetical Pasadena renters. One of them lives in a 20-unit building and the other one in a single-family home. So the 20-unit building guy hasn't paid rent in 9 months. And the state of emergency lifts, say, at the end of December.
Yep.
So it gets continued again. Well, he's doing it 2 months at a time. So it gets continued till the end of November. And then the governor doesn't continue it again. 90 days later, if we still have Judicial Council Rule 1, your landlord can file an eviction action against you and gets a summons issued, and you now have to answer. Right now, you have 5 days to answer. If AB 1436 passes, you'll have 30 days to answer. But right now you have 5 days to answer, so we're going to get overwhelmed with all of you coming in all at the same time. But we get an answer filed, and now we start the preparation process. Both sides propound discovery. ask each other questions, demand each other's documents and proof. And once that process is over, you start a negotiation process. We anticipate if the landlord filed that lawsuit without giving you that 6 months, because 6 months is what Pasadena tenants have right now to pay, we're going to have a pretty strong case. And we're going to demand a jury. There is a shortage of judges and an abundance of cases. So those cases are going to get delayed and delayed. And where you're going to use that delay to listen, to try to talk some reason into this landlord who should have given you the 6 months to pay, and negotiate either a rent reduction, a reduction in the amount of the debt you owe, and or a very long payment plan, or a combination thereof. Once the eviction lawsuit is filed, the landlord can't collect your future rent. So you have some leverage there to try to get the landlord to be reasonable. And because you live in Pasadena, you're going to have legal support from the Eviction Defense Network and the Access LA Northeast LA Coalition. It's Access LA NELAC, Northeast LA County Coalition. And I think you're going to be perfectly fine. Let's say that this tenant who hasn't paid rent for 9 months is a tenant living in a 20-unit building. And let's say he doesn't know about us and he doesn't know about any of this, but his pastor or the teacher at his kid's school or the person at the community center that he goes to is aware, and they share information, and this person has gone through our 5-point training program, and when they get to point 4, oh my God, this is a potential leader. There's 20 people in your building. Let me connect you with the Pasadena Tenants Union. And the Tenants Union goes out and organizes those tenants and makes a demand to the landlord. 20 of your tenants were not able, of your 20 tenants, 16 were not able to pay their rent due to COVID. This is what each of them can do. Our offers are XYZ. Collectively bargaining, probably with a threat to solidarity strike because you've got neighbors that are in trouble. Collectively bargaining a solution for all of the tenants in the building. With regards to the unpaid rent, maybe this is a place where the landlord is rent gouging. Let's get a rent reduction going here. Maybe there's needed repairs. What, landlord? You don't want to do all of this? No problem. Let's see if we can get some recovery money to help the tenants buy the building and form a limited equity co-op so that we can take this off of the rental housing market. So the idea is to use that 12-month period that we have in most of the county. You only have 6 in Pasadena right now. We're still working on getting you 12. We're going on 2 routes to get you 12. We're trying to get the county board of supervisors to make the county law the base, so everybody in the county gets 12. And we are also fighting for AB 1436. Let's do that same scenario with the first. Should I keep going? This is good, right? Let's go instead of just talking about laws, talking about how they'll apply concretely, I think helps people. First guy, no way to organize a building. It's just him in the building. It's a single family home, or maybe it's a duplex or a triplex and 2 of the units are empty. But 1436 has passed. When his pastor goes to help him figure it out, we've got 12 months to pay. It can't be filed in eviction court. The landlord filed in eviction court. The landlord now has to prove it's not COVID-19 related because he filed an eviction court. The landlord, you just get to testify, I lost my job. You're going to win that case, right? And the fact that you're going to win that case because the landlord should not have filed an eviction court gives you leverage to negotiate. And you're going to, because the Northeast LA Coalition has put together resources, there's going to be representation for you in court. because the Eviction Defense Network is opening an office in Northeast LA to cover the Pasadena and West Covina courts. And so
Wow.
we're trying to do that all over the county through something called the Right to Counsel Coalition. So Eden will be covering those two courts, and other legal services programs will be covering other courts. So I think that people should walk away from this feeling vigilant, cautious, aware, but not stressed out. I'm trying to reduce stress while creating a sense of urgency that people need to get involved. And really, routine. You get up, you brush your face, you wash your face, you brush your teeth, you make a cup of coffee, you go for a half an hour walk, you come back, you pick up your phone, you call your city council member, your county board of supervisor member, your state assembly member, your state senator, and your federal congressperson. 5 calls. It'll take you 10 minutes. Hi, this is Elena Popp. I still don't have the money to pay my rent. Nothing has changed since yesterday. I need you to pass a law that will give me real rent relief. Hashtag cancel rent, please, now. And in the meantime, support AB 1436, because right now I think that's what we can realistically do. We will change that message once we know people are safe for another 20 months.
Wow.
Is that a plan?
My last question would be to this whole situation, and yes, I think we need rent cancellation more than anything. If we give these corporations all these trillions of dollars, let's bail out the regular people, the working class people. Not even the working class people, the poor people. Because there's not going to be a lot of working class people once this thing ends. And it's scary. What about protections as far as, let's say I go through the whole thing. You guys kind of fight for me, whatnot, and they figure out a way that, well, you have to pay for the 12 months rent you owe, but then I can't pay it. Isn't there a way that my credit will be protected in this situation, since this all happened under the lights of COVID? I mean, a lot of people are saying that they're not going to be able to smear your credit because this happened during a virus. Isn't there laws or something coming out to protect my credit in the future in case we don't come to complete terms with our landlords?
None exist now, but AB 1436 has a provision that COVID-19 related rent debts cannot affect your credit.
Thank you.
Okay, good to know.
We got to get 1436 passed.
All right,
I'm calling Chris Holden tomorrow.
5 calls every day.
Chris.
No, 5 calls. City council, board of supervisors, state assembly member. That would for you would be Chris Holden. State senator Anthony Portantino for you, and your federal representative. 5 calls every morning after your half-hour walk.
Yeah. Judy Chu hasn't answered a phone call since 1983, so I don't know. That's she hides more than Nancy Pelosi, for crying out loud.
Well, Elena, thank you so much for this. We really do need an update. We really are in precarious times. There's a lot of uncertainty, so people just like offhand, people are scared to not pay their rent because they think they're doing something wrong, even though it's counterintuitive for a lot of people. But this is coming to a point where people need to start saving money for for food, because we don't know when Congress is going to pass any more, any more money from the federal government towards people. If we're shutting down again, it's kind of a precarious situation. So thank you, and just share the links everywhere, please.
I just went through a training from something called the Debt Collective. Oh my God, eye-opening around debt guilt and how we should not feel debt guilt. So stop feeling guilty. It's not a useful emotion.
Gotcha. So sit still. If you can't pay your rent, don't pay your rent. Notify your landlord. You got the letter in the tenant's guide. Wait till we can collectively join together, figure out what bills can pass. But don't be nervous. Don't be scared about not paying the rent. It's a virus going on. We don't know what's going to open out there. I tell people, don't waste your money in the bank paying it on rent. What are you going to do for food down the road?
Especially if you have a family.
Yeah. It's sit still. And if you can afford to pay your rent, ladies and gentlemen out there in the grassroots, don't pay your rent. Join the rent strike, because the more numbers we have for collective bargaining, the better. Correct, Elena?
Well, you need to read the Solidarity Rent Striker page and then make a decision. As a lawyer, I'm much more cautious on that advice. You can say that to the viewers. I need to encourage them to read that page first and then make a decision. It's the equivalent of being Rosa Parks. She got on that bus. She was violating the law. She knew the consequences of that violation, chose to violate it. If you want to be Rosa Parks, all power to you, right? But know the consequences and then make a decision.
Johnny, you got anything else?
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Yes. Thank you, Elena, so much
you,
for
Elena.
joining us. And I'm sure we'll talk to you probably next month as people are calling us. What do I do? What do I do? I'm like, let me get Elena Popp on. She has answers.
Yeah. This is good timing. A week before the rent is due.
Exactly. And the rent,
There you go.
the rent is too damn high, right? I said it too many times. Fam has to help me on my cheers. Thank you very much for joining us, Elena. For Pasta Jardula,
Fiorella,
Jonny Sue on the ones and twos with Elena Popp.
Combo out. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.